Testing 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 test AAAO testing 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 test AAAO AAAO testing 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 test test testing testing test 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 testing testing G G G G G G G G G G G आप सुन रहे हैं रेडियो रूहाफ़ज़ा। Testing 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 test AAAO testing 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 test AAAO AAAO testing 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 test test testing testing test 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 testing testing G G G G G G G G G G G आप सुन रहे हैं रेडियो रूहाफ़ज़ा।
Bundles of flowers away through the hours of cold. winter shall howl at the walls, tearing down doors of time. Shelter.
कृपया दरवाजों से हटकर खड़े हों. Please stand away from the doors.
Promise me this. You wait for me only, scared of the lonely arms.
Green Park. Next station is Green Park.
So fast, far below these bounds.
होगा ही नहीं, उतारा तो था भी तो मैं नीचे होगा कहीं नहीं गया होगा, कहीं होगा इतना है उठो 200 का है अबे ये 5 वर्ड 95 है और इसको तू लगाता भी नहीं है क्या 5 वर्ड जो भी अबे रीयूजेबल 95 है तेरे को नया नया नहीं खरीदना पड़ता
बहुत सोचा था राजेश सर की तो रिकॉर्डिंग
कोई नहीं भाई मैं सुट्टे भी तो ज़्यादा पीता हूँ जब पूछ से जब पोल्यूशन हो जाता है तो क्या हालत होती है मेरी एक पैकेट नैपकिन ये मेरे लिए रखता है सिर्फ एक नानू है एक मांगता हूँ एक ही नैपकिन तो घर के लिए तो 10-12 पैक करके देते हैं
स्टेशन तो है हमारा बेटा वहाँ पे जाएगा इसलिए 10 जगह वो अपने खुद के बच्चे को ट्रस्ट नहीं कर सकते ये खेलेगा नहीं अकेलेगा नहीं बहुत ज़्यादा 50 से 70,000 ऐसी स्पेंड कर दी कि ये ले जाएगा और उसके दिमाग में ऑब्वियसली मैथ इधर है उसका लैपटॉप इधर है ठीक है ऐसे मान लो तुम कुछ नहीं करना मैथ का अगर तुम अभी वैसे नहीं चलता है तुम समझ नहीं रहे गेमिंग लैपटॉप से जाके तुम मैथ से नहीं जा सकते वैसे नहीं चलता
You were listening to Perspective by Fiza. Now you're going to listen to A Day in My Life by Irtiza.
तरक्की महकमा के कमिश्नर सेक्रेटरी मनदीप कौर ने कल जम्मू कश्मीर में हिमायत प्रोग्राम की अमल आवरी का प्रोजेक्ट की अमल आवरी एजेंसियों के साथ एक मीटिंग में जायजा लिया। उन्होंने कहा कि हुकूमत इस स्कीम के तहत प्लेसमेंट से मुंसलिक स्किल को फरोग देने पर भरपूर तवज्जो दे रही है। कमिश्नर सेक्रेटरी ने नौजवानों को पायदार रोजगार के मौके पैदा करने पर जोर दिया। उन्होंने कहा कि हुकूमत जिले ज़राए पैदावार और किसानों की बहबूद महकमे के प्रिंसिपल सेक्रेटरी नवीन कुमार चौधरी ने कल जम्मू कश्मीर में कमर्शियल फ्लोरिकल्चर को
Learn a new word. Let's make something out.
ये पाना पाती देसी की
देसी पाना है।
हाँ जिस दिन हमें पता चलता है कि हमारे पापा की इनकम जो है वो घर के खर्चों से कम है, तो हम उसी दिन अडल्ट हो जाते हैं। तो इसलिए मैं छोटी मोटी नौकरियां करता था।
Isn't now. So, no more things, okay? Thank you. It's called manifesting. Look it up.
Looks like you're having a hard time reading on the web. Wait, are you seriously trying to highlight on
to Srinagar? As a reminder, Srinagar is a military-based airport and photography is strictly prohibited there. The captain of this flight is Captain Gurinder Singh Sekho, assisted by First Officer Abhijit Yadav, and I am the senior cabin crew for the flight, Guresh Kaur.
That was A Day in My Life by Irtizam. You will now tune in to Interruptions by Maithili.
शैम्पू से डैंड्रफ वापस आएगा ही।
uncaring void. The key to being happy isn't to search for meaning, it's to just keep yourself busy with unimportant nonsense, and eventually you'll be dead.
Well, I guess I can keep my options open.
Great!
पहले बोलो भाई इधर आ
cancer you get, because it's zero, which means instead of sugar you get all those sweeteners.
बैठे बैठे कैसे होगा डाइजेशन?
नट्स हेल्दी बच्चों के लिए जितना फ्रूट रिक्वायरमेंट डेली रेकमेंड करते हैं।
You are listening to Interruptions by Maithili. You're now going to listen to Narendran's Feb 22 Commute Companions.
मेरी अम्मी, मैं 1952 में उनसे जुड़ी और वो दिन और आखिरी दिन जब तक उनके इंतकाल नहीं, उनकी डेथ नहीं हुई, मैं उनके साथ थी, कभी नहीं छोड़ा। पता नहीं लगता था कि बस इनके आगे कुछ दुनिया ही नहीं, बस यही है मेरे लिए। ये अम्मी की साड़ी है और ये उन्होंने मुझे मेरी शादी पे दी थी। जब मैंने शादी भी उन्होंने कराई थी, सब कुछ उनका था, रजिस्ट्रेशन में वो उनकी विटनेस में वो लिखा हुआ है, उनका नाम है। और उनकी मर्जी से हुई और ये साड़ी उन्होंने मुझे दी और मैं इसको अब प्रसाद समझ के रखती हूँ। मोहब्बत ऐसी चीज नहीं है जो एकदम खत्म हो जाए, मोहब्बत तो जिंदगी भर रहती है। बचपन की जो नाउमीदियां थी और उसके बाद जिस जिस शख्स को उन्होंने अपनाने की कोशिश की उसने पलट के नहीं देखा। फिर ऐसा होते होते आदत से हो गई कि दर्द होना ही चाहिए गाने के लिए। कभी कभी गाते रोने लगती थी, मैं पूछती थी किसी ने कुछ कहा, कुछ हो गया? नहीं, कुछ नहीं, बस रो रही और गा रही, वो आंसू बह रहे। तब मैं अब समझती हूँ कि मेरी अम्मी के कहीं दिल टूटा होगा, कहीं दर्द उठा होगा जो आज उभर रहा है। सो दर्द उनके लिए बहुत जरूरी था, बहुत जरूरी था गाने में, उनके दर्द में, नहीं तो वो गा नहीं सकती थी।
पिया के देश उनको देना ये संदेश, तुम बिन लिया जो किया भेस, सज दिया संसार रे कोयलिया मत कर पुकार, करे जुआला गे कटार कोयलिया।
अम्मी का जो रंग था, जो स्टाइल था, उसमें दोनों चीजें मिक्स थी। एक तो पूरब का भी पुकार, हुक और पटियाला की ताने, छोटी छोटी खटके मुर्गियां ज्यादा। चैती गाती थी, होरी गाती थी, और होरी जब गाती थी तो लगता था कि ब्रिज में वाकई होरी हो रही। एक वही कलाकार थी जो एक ठुमरी को कई रागों में गा जाती थी और रागों में गाती थी, जैसे कौसक धनी में ठुमरी, खमाज की ठुमरी कौसक धनी में, खमाज की ठुमरी चंद्रकौंस में। और जब गाती थी, क्योंकि उनका मन कर रहा था तो गाई, और ऐसा लगता था कि जैसे वो ठुमरी उसी राग के लिए बनी है। ये खूबी थी उनकी।
এতক্ষণ ভারতবর্ষের স্বনামধন্য গায়িকা শ্রীমতী বেগম আক্তারের কাছ থেকে গান শুনছিল। আমরা যখন শুনতে আরম্ভ করি সেটা ছিল 1966। আজকে এইমাত্র এটা 1967 হয়ে গেছে, অর্থাৎ আমরা 8 বছর ধরে ওর গান শুনেছি এবং আমাদের এই আশা যেন বহু বছর ধরে উনি আমাদের এইভাবে আনন্দ দিতে পারেন। हमारी तरफ से आप सब लोगों को नया साल मुबारक हो। शुक्रिया। इसलिए मेरे ख्याल से गायकी का जो मकाम है वो सिर्फ इतना है, फिल्मी म्यूजिक हो या क्लासिकल म्यूजिक हो या कोई हो, अगर हमारे दिल पे उसका असर होता है तो हम उसके कायल हैं। अगर असर नहीं होता है तो चाहे वो गुलाम अली खां बैठ के गाएं, चाहे अमीर खां बैठ के गाएं, हमारे लिए बराबर।
और हम जानते हैं कि आपका कितना मकाम है और कितना ऊंचा मकाम है।
ये तो आप
और आपके, अगर यूं कहें कि आपके कदम से ये गायकी बुलंद रुतबा हासिल कर चुकी है तो कोई मजाक नहीं होगा और सही होगा।
ये तो आप लोगों की इज्जत अफजाई है, वरना मैं अपने को तो इस काबिल समझती हूँ।
खैर ये तो फन नवाजी भी हो सकती है।
बिस्मिल्लाह खां साहब से एक बार मैंने सवाल किया, मैंने कहा बेगम अख्तर साहिबा की आवाज में आपको क्या लगता था? उन्होंने कहा था हम लोग बरखुरदार घंटों इस बात का इंतजार करते रहते थे बैठ के कि कब अख्तरी बाई में वो गला वो लहरा के मोटा होता है और वहां पे वो कयामत ढाती हैं। तो आप ये देखिए कि जिस चीज को संगीत में या संगीत शास्त्र में कमी मानते हैं और कहते हैं कि यहाँ शुद्ध या विकृत स्वर की एक दिक्कत हो गई, वहां पे वो विकृति, वो कहीं से बाहर से आया हुआ अलग सा अलहदा रंग या वो एलिमेंट उनको खूबसूरत गायिका बनाता था।
देखो एक सब्जेक्ट बनने लगा। सही, बिल्कुल सही बात, बहुत 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 अच्छा। इसको तो कर लीजिए। ये वो
हुजूर, मैंने गजलें उसी लिए कहना शुरू की जिसलिए गालिब मुसव्विरी सीखना चाहते थे। अच्छा। मेरी असल गरज ये है कि अगर मैं गजल कहूँगा तो मैं गजल से करीब हो जाऊंगा, सिर्फ इसलिए मैंने गजल कही। इसलिए कि बेगम अख्तर साहब के सामने आके सिर्फ के गजल सुनने मिलती बल्कि गजल देखने को भी मिलती है।
There's a form of poetry which goes back to 6th century Arabia, and it was domesticated in Iran, in Persia in the 13th century. It's called the ghazals, spelled Ghazal. It's been mispronounced and misunderstood and mispracticed by many American poets, chiefly people like Adrian Rich and Jim Harrison. So I've been trying to write some in English following the form so people would know how it operates. The way it operates really is that you have couplets, and each couplet is like a separate poem, not connected to the others, but they are connected by a very strict scheme of meter and rhyme and refrain. The scheme occurs in both lines of the first couplet and then only in the second line of succeeding couplets. So except for that scheme, you are not supposed to see any thematic connections. I have a student who in a poem of his had the phrase Arabic of it all, and I said to him, oh Tony, you could write a ghazal and you could have of it all as your refrain, and big, ik would be your rhyme preceding the refrain. He didn't do anything with it, and so a year ago I was at the Charlotte airport waiting for a plane and I had a 6-hour delay. I ordered a scotch and at the Cheers bar, and this person said, the waitress said, well, for $1 more you can have a double. So I said, sure, get me a double. And before the evening was over, I had 4 or 5 doubles. And then this line kept coming to me, Arabic of it all, Arabic of it all. So my first couplet was, I say that after all is the trick of it all when suddenly you say Arabic of it all. So that was the first couplet. So the first couplet tells you the scream of it all is the refrain, ik is the rhyme preceding it. Are you with me? Okay. I say that after all is the trick of it all when suddenly you say Arabic of it all. This tradition of the ghazal, I was telling you about the couplets. One day I was in Delhi, sitting on the steps of this famous mosque there that Shah Jahan, the King Shah Jahan had built. It's a grand mosque. And I was waiting for a friend and we were going to go to a restaurant, an eating place nearby. And he was late, and I suppose I was lost in thought. And a man went by and just out of the blue said to me, oh respected brother, I'm translating. He said, oh respected brother, what are you thinking? So I quoted a line from the great 19th century Urdu poet Ghalib to him. And before I could finish it, he came back with the next line to me, which was a very exciting moment for me, to see this person who did not seem particularly literate would know this line, this couplet by this famous poet. And then I went to buy meat, I remember, in the shop nearby, and this butcher, while he was cutting up this meat in these very grisly circumstances, you can say, was very eloquent as far as the Urdu language went. So this is called a butcher. It's reference to two Urdu poets, Ghalib and Mir, in it. In this lane near Jama Masjid, where he wraps kilos of meat in sheets of paper, the ink of the news stains his knuckles. The script is wet in his palms. Urdu, that's the language. Urdu, bloody at his fingertips, is still fine on his lips. The language polished smooth by knives on knives. He hacks the festival goats, throws their skins to dogs. I smile and quote a Ghalib line. He completes the couplet, smiles, quotes a Mir line. I complete the couplet. He wraps my kilo of ribs. I give him the money. The change clutters our moment of courtesy. Our phrases snapping in mid-syllable. Ghalib's ghazals left unrhymed. This is another ghazal in which I used one of her Kashmir lines for one of the couplets. There's a song which apparently people knew in America in the 20s or the turn of the century called Pale Hands I Love Beside the Shalimar. I don't know, and apparently many people used to sing it. So I used those lines, so they're written by a woman named Lawrence Hope, and they started off this poem, this ghazal. Where are you now who lies beneath your spell tonight, before you agonize him in farewell tonight? Pale hands that once loved me beside the Shalimar, whom else from rapture's road will you expel tonight? Those fabrics of Kashmir to make me beautiful, trinket to gem, me to adorn, how tell tonight? I beg for haven, prisons let open your gates, a refugee from belief seeks a cell tonight. Executioners near the woman at the window, damn you Elijah, I'll bless Jezebel tonight. Lord, cried out the idols, don't let us be broken. Only we can convert the infidel tonight. Has God's vintage loneliness turned to vinegar? He's poured rust into the sacred well tonight. He's freed some fire from ice in pity for heaven. He's left open for God the doors of hell tonight. And I, Shahid, only am escaped to tell thee, God sobs in my arms, call me Ishmael tonight. Oh, don't go, don't go. Okay, let me tell you something risky, then go. Come. Just come in for a second. How nice to embarrass someone. I'll just tell you something, a funny moment before I go to my last poem. I'm very enamored of people who can write one-line poems, and I said this in the class earlier. And W.S. Merwin has a poem called Elegy. Who would I show it to? That's the poem. See? And William Matthews has a one-line poem. The title of the poem is Premature Ejaculation. Sorry, this poem's already over. So I did one. It is, on hearing a lover not seen for 20 years has attempted suicide. I suspect it was over me. Okay, you can go now.
That was Narendran's Feb 22 Commute Companions. Next up is Orient Disorient by Niharika.
कैसे करूंगी? आंटी संभाल के देना। आजा। आंटी कहाँ रखूं? आंटी बता दो ना जल्दी से। क्या कर रही हो? अच्छी लग रही है हंसते हुए। We're trying to find Devadas on Netflix and Prime. It's not available. It's available on Jio Cinemas. So we are settling for Mohabbatein. Yep.
Well, it was a slow ball. He was through with a shot, and the ball just gently went on him with stumps. But he's got one. Hope let's finish with 4. And this time, India definitely finished at the end of the 50th over. 265.
अच्छा ब्राह्मण को गिनने क्या तुम्हारा नाम होगा? ब्राह्मण तो खाते में चोर बैठे हैं सारे मोदी जैसे।
मैं ये पूछ रहा था कि अगर हम पैसे का एक्सपेक्ट साइड रख लें, उसके बाद अगर सोचने की कोशिश करें तो फिर मतलब मॉनेटरी टर्म्स में सब कुछ तो होता ही है।
यू मीन्स कि एज ए रिटर्न थ्योरिकली वी हैव टू थिंक ओवर इट, राइट?
कि
मैं कहना चाहता हूं, मेरा शौक है
इमोशन, हाँ मतलब इमोशंस,
नॉट इमोशन, दैट इज योर प्रोफेशनल एटीट्यूड है आपका वहाँ पर।
हो सकता है,
ठीक है ना,
वो भी कह सकते हैं।
बट एक टाइम तक अच्छा लगेगा। बता उम्र कितनी है आपकी?
अभी 26 साल।
26। हाँ जी। गर्लफ्रेंड है?
नहीं अभी नहीं।
जब बनाएगा उसके बाद पता चलेगा।
नहीं तो वही तो बात है, हम अगर उसको क्या इसके अलावा
करेगा तो एक रात में पता चल जाएगा कि प्रोफेशनली का अच्छा है या प्रैक्टिकली अच्छा है। क्योंकि जब पैसे की कीमत का अंदाजा तब होता है जब या तो आप करोड़पति हो ना, तो आपको जरूरत नहीं है पैसे की, तो आप ये चीज़ें कर सकते हो। आप उस चीज़ को डिमोलाइज करने के लिए आप बाहर जा सकते हो, बाहर की कंट्री में।
You were listening to Orient Disorient by Niharika. Next up, Time Is Not by Tanya.
Even when it shows physical world, like gardens, roofs, curtains, or whatever, materials, Price and Whispers is full of red curtains. So, it's very material, palpably material and so on. Cushions and many Bergman uses lots of fills of red, lots of stuff. And so does Antoniani, so does Alendene and so on. But those materials are not materials that yield to impulse and action. It's not mobilizable to anything. So they are there more like a part of this a feeling or a mood or a accentuation of this exploration of the mind and so on. So that's why this randomization, this dream-like quality, all of them only add to that. They become electroslide, that you generally look at that, whatever the landscape or the room, you see that and you try to get to the feeling it is trying to generate. The feeling of forlornness, the feeling of aimlessness, the feeling of meaninglessness. So if you say that, maybe I can send you a list of 10 films or whatever. The minimum requirement for you to understand time is cinema. But when Sherry or some of you might have seen some of these films, that Germany Year Zero, that film by Rossellini, is a very important film. That is the Germany, the Berlin after the war. The Berlin has been bombed and it dies. And there is this young boy who he lost many family members in the war. It's almost like an orphan. He roams around in that war-torn Berlin. So actually shot on location. It is no sets or nothing. Because Berlin was really like that. So he went, Rossellini went there, had this guy performing, actually, bomb buildings, empty buildings and streets and so on. So that's a classic film. It's all about that dissoluteness, emptiness, and aimlessness.
You were listening to Time Is Not by Tanya. Next up is The Unheard Loop by Kulsum.
like this all week. I thought we at least had to work together. Every day?
Oh, Carrie, I'm under so much pressure. Don't make me feel worse than I do.
I'm not trying to make you feel worse. I said nothing when you left me alone with your wife.
do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this. Man. Yes. Nicola? Yeah. Okay. Step out of the gun. Yeah. Forward. I can't do this. I can't do this.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a second. I'm just changing some. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all the tracks for today. And I think we're still live on the radio. I don't know if there's a way for you guys to check it, but I think there'll be a little bit of a lag between us speaking on
Audio is very low.
the radio. Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that's all the tracks for today. And I think we are live on the radio right now. But there might be a little bit of lag between our conversation right now and it going out into the broadcast.
Kaushal, should we, like, where should we start talking? Because now, like, two voices are coming.
Yeah, you can. Sorry, I missed what you were saying, Nitin. Yeah, I think there's a
Okay, yeah.
feedback from the radio, so you guys might have to stop listening to the radio and get on the call.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is quite fun.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, this is quite fun.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Oh shit, this is echoing now.
I think some of you still need to
From
turn off your
everyone because I
radios.
think they're listening to the radio
Yeah.
while talking. Hi, Sonam. Okay. Hello. Are you guys on the call? Is everyone able to listen to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah.
मुझे पता ही नहीं चला कब पुलसम का खत्म हुआ
Yeah.
कभी कॉल चालू हुआ बस
No,
एको
this is echo हो रहा है आवाज अभी भी? I mean I think the echo might be because if you're playing the radio along with the call. Cool. Okay. I hope everyone's able to hear each other now. So yeah, I thought that this was quite fun. I really enjoyed myself listening to everyone. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I tuned in my entire family who's listening.
No, I think we have some stats also. Around 30 people have been listening on an average. I think numbers going up and down here and there.
Your voice is not very.
Oh.
I think Asma's microphone is on.
Huh? Yeah, I hope this is better.
I think it's also interesting. There's an echo.
Asma, your mic is on.
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. I think it was also interesting because, Kaushav, what you were discussing in the previous session about there being uh, not a broadcast into the unknown, but going to a specific like stream of people. I think that sense was very prominent for me, and at the same time, I kept thinking like I had to, my brain would get confused that it's a two-way conversation at sometimes, but then you'd be like, no, this is a one-way stream. But there was an intimacy that you felt about it, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, totally. I agree. In fact, for me, there was this sort of, that image of the listeners huddled in close to a radio. That image kept like playing in my mind, even from Fanon's text and even from like our discussions last time. Even though we were all like, I was actually listening to it on my laptop. I don't know if some of you might have been like tuned in on your mobile phones, but there was something very static about it, like being around the laptop and almost like imagining everybody huddled into their own spaces. And it was definitely like there was this thing of being let in on the audio streams that are preoccupying everybody's like mind spaces, So it was kind of moving from one audio stream to the other, one mental space to the other in a way. So
Yeah.
And I think the Telegram group also, my voice is okay. Yeah, the Telegram group also, made that intimate bubble because we knew there are 32 people who might be listening to this. And also for me, it was more like 2 hours of zoning out of the physical sound, because I was listening in my headphones and with noise cancellation and all, so I was just cut off from the physical world, but I was doing things, so it was as if I'm in someone else's space, and it didn't feel like one person's sound is separate from the other. It almost felt like flowing into one space to another, and it was a constant for me.
Yeah, there was also like a very strong sense of like interior, like an inward sort of listening, when you're listening to like say the YouTube videos or like a file, a media file basically, versus say recordings of sounds around in the surroundings. And I thought that was really interesting to tune into how each person is also kind of tuning in and tuning out, and you're reading it through that idea of being inside and outside within a particular state of mind or a zone. That was really fascinating to hear. Like in the beginning, especially, I was finding it very funny that a lot of typing sounds. And I was like dissertation. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I was wondering whether that is a part of the stream or whether that's just like ambient stuff also pouring into the streams. That was pretty cool actually.
Yeah, lots of typing sounds, lots of cats. There was a pattern that I was sensing from the class. But for sure, like the sense of being in someone else's headspace was coming through with each of there's some kind of modulation from one sound to another. Tanya is saying in term papers.
There was also this duality which I could feel, that some kind of sounds were like a background sound for me, and the others I could not do anything else while I was listening to them. I had to listen intently. Yeah, this duality was very interesting because sometimes you like focus and sometimes you are like in your surroundings again.
That's also the fascinating thing about like listening, no? Because you don't have like you have eyelids, you don't have earlids, but yet the ear can keep shifting focus. So I can totally tune into something, totally tune out of something, but at the same time, I'm forever immersed in a sea of sound. constantly, like, it's a very inward, drawing inward kind of a process.
So, like in that sense, I was also thinking how like listening is a bit like breathing. Like you can't stop yourself from listening, but you can, to some extent, decide what to tune into and what to tune out of. Uh, or like what sound becomes ambient to you, and
Yeah, that's why the feeling of it being in loop, though it wasn't, or maybe it was, I'm still not sure. But yeah, I think with the background sounds, like we could see some sounds repeating from the beginning, and that's why I felt like it was connecting and not separate.
I think Kulsum's track had was essentially like loops, no? Unheard loops. It was quite. But I mean, generally curious to hear from all of you guys about your experience of listening to your own sounds through this medium.
I think it was much more different than listening to like listening right after I had made, because now that I know that someone is also listening to it, it kind of made me think more of what is happening, and not just about my sounds, but even like I feel like there was like a very different kind of an attention that I had when I'm listening in, like as a person, like alone. But now that I'm listening on a radio, I felt like, and I know that there are a lot of people who are listening with me. I felt like there was a much, like, is it a kind of a panopticon? But I don't know. But it still was working like that. Like I was more cautiously listening to every sound. Like I do even recall some elements. Like I remember, like when Fiza's sound was starting, I knew that there was a conscious attempt at making layers of the music playing and the metro, and I felt like, oh, I have registered this. But when I was listening in, like as a like alone, I really didn't think of it at all.
Yeah, I think that adrenaline was there, especially for us, because we were kind of queuing these things, and even the interludes where there was supposed to be some kind of a track change announcement situation. So that sense of liveness for the past couple of hours has been like an adrenaline shot in a way. It's quite interesting to go through it in this sense.
How did you guys feel about listening to your own tracks?
I just wanted to start with that. Thank you for asking this question because I feel like because I heard I uploaded a couple of versions and I kept listening to all of them, all 15 minutes, and it felt like that I'd created a sound. But I think like listening it on the radio kind of made me feel exactly as I feel when I'm listening to these sounds, and that was very. I feel like I think when I listen to my voice, when I listen to my audio, because usually I registered that there were long pauses, there were long silences, there was not much typing, and there was this one constant sound of this heavy boom kind of a thing. And I think listening to it on the radio, I kind of felt that like listening to it, I was like कि मैं अकेली हूँ, मतलब अभी जैसे मैं घर में अकेली होती हूँ ये सुनते वक्त, तो मैं अभी भी अकेली हूँ. And although there were a lot of people around me, I did not feel as if कि I've created a sound. It felt like कि जैसे मैंने अपना दिन सुन लिया, कि मेरा दिन कैसा था. I heard it like through sounds. So that was actually very creepy. But yeah, I kind of also, I think while I was recording it, I also realized that uh, very interesting that you said that airs don't have airlets, so we also kind of tune out. So it, like, to me it was like when you use a camera and you focus on certain things, but there's also certain other things around it that kind of go into the background. So it's exactly like that. When you start recording, you also notice that there's so much going on, especially I think in Kulsum's audio. I just focused on the background, and I think for me that was what I was focusing on, not on what's the foreground voice. So that was really interesting. But I also realized that I have now a couple of 15-minute audios to use for my bedtime soothing session. So that was great.
Also, if anyone has any like reflections on what it was to listen to this as opposed to the calls. Uh,
Yeah, that felt like more like one, because you were expecting it to be a certain kind of a way. Like it was supposed to be a call where you did not have enough time to respond to it. You just had to pick up a call, and for some time, it worked like a spam call in that moment. But I think these sounds, with the lot of time that it had, it kind of made you like it captured you for the moment जब आप वो सुन रहे थे. So I also think it because like when I usually record those boom sounds, so those are uh, these helicopter surveillance that keeps happening around this place. And I think while I was recording for the first time, I actually went out and tried to locate कि ये है कहाँ पे आसमान में. Which is very weird because I've been listening to this sound for बचपन से, but this was the first time I actually went out to see कि ये आसमान पे है कहाँ पे, because this is like वो bird song होता है ना कि वो कहीं से आ रही है and you don't like put too much effort कि वो पेड़ पे कहाँ खड़ी है. So that kind of a thing. I just saw it कि अच्छा ये आसमान में यहाँ से निकलता है या ये इस वक्त पे ये आता है आसमान में and all of that. So it kind of for a moment it had like you had to put in that effort, and I think that's why it was also exhausting to do all of this, and to also realize that how much sound you make or don't make. And if I keep thinking if we could just look at each other lives through just sounds or just WhatsApp images, what would you get an idea कि दूसरे की जिंदगी कैसी है? Would you for a moment feel like that you are the other, or are you trying like are you successfully in that sound, or you feel that otherness just hearing that sound?
Very interesting.
um,
Go on, Naren. Sorry.
I also felt like just waiting for the radio broadcast was also something which was very exciting because usually like at the present stage we are like where like हमें कुछ चाहिए होता तो हम हमें वो मिल जाना चाहिए, but you know that the radio broadcast is going to be at a particular time, so you wait, and this is this anticipation I guess makes things a little bit more exciting, and that that this is like waiting for that I think like
Yeah. No, and what Ituza was talking earlier about this foregrounding of the background was really coming through, and I think a lot of the sounds that we heard today. I was also getting reminded of Maithili's sound, which was I felt was essentially a composition made up of. In that way, it was being framed as interruptions. And then it felt like this constant a track made up of interruptions, which now you are listening to so intently, in the sense of they're not interruptions anymore, but they're suddenly an object of attention. Yeah, very curious to hear from you also, Maithili.
Yeah, definitely. When I was thinking of making this track, I was thinking on the lines of interruption and attention. But I agree, like the whole, all the tracks felt like one because there was constantly this thing of interruption. There was disorientation. There were a lot of repetitive sounds as well. Like there was a breathing sound that all of us, many of us took, and then there was I think washing machine sound and notification sound typing. It was also interesting how it was framed with different things, like framed around different sounds, like around drum sound, or I think Niharika put it around a construction sound, which also was like kind of like unwanted sounds or annoying sounds. So that framing was also interesting, but that repetition was also there. And for mine, I also added this song in the beginning, which was also interrupted, but it was actually a song that was playing in my head. I hadn't listened to it that week, but it was a song that was stuck in my head. So I was kind of thinking of how that would also be like, in between these everyday sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a very jingle-like quality to all of them, and it's like even I think not just this first part of the track, like with this song, but in between also when I think there's a vendor, distant sound of a vendor kind of selling something, and this idea of like a jingle and a repetition of the rhythm that's also calling attention to a particular object or a particular thing to be sold or to a TV program. I don't know, like those are the kind of images that were coming to my mind. This jingles, yeah, it's like the day that like this entire soundscape around you kind of had this very jingle-like quality to it. That's very interesting.
ऑल्सो जो मैथिली बोल रही है कि मतलब उसके दिमाग में गाना चल रहा था, तो हम जो एक क्लास में शायद डिस्कस भी कर रहे थे और एक वीडियो भी देखा था कि आवाज कहाँ आ रही है तुम्हें, and how do we differentiate that voice, when it's overlapping. Sometimes we're focusing on that, and that's why we zone out from what we actually listen to. So that's also a very interesting component.
I think that song that Maithili had used is also a song that stuck in my head. It's one of those songs that's very popular in Instagram reels. I think Hollow Cove is the musician or something, no? So when I heard that, I was also for a moment wondering if it's actually there in the stream or is it just something that's playing elsewhere. So I think this is a very it's a very fascinating idea of the sound that's stuck in your head, like this idea of the earworm, because it also has this element of transmittability, of contagion, um, and that is something I kind of also found in each of the tracks. Somehow there's something that I'd carry into the next, some element that I'd carry into the next, and that would stay on in a way, it'll linger for a while longer. Yeah.
I think when Asma said ki bahut typing ho rahi and there is this connection, I also feel like since you made this comment, that maybe it's also because although we are like in such different sounds and we are in different places, somehow you could have guessed that ये सब लोग एक साथ हैं somehow. It like even if it is online, like, these people are like in some kind of a group and they are connected by some kind of a connection that these sounds feel like they're like bleeding into each other. So yeah, maybe it was these Instagram reels that came coming up. So it feels like कि ऐसा नहीं लग रहा है कि बहुत ही वो isolated है कोई जगह पे. ये एक सुन के ऐसा लग सकता है कि ये शायद 4 लोगों की बात है जो शायद एक ही साथ बैठे हुए हैं.
They're bound by the same algorithms.
Yeah.
I was also curious generally to think about it felt like some of the tracks there was a strong sense of a narrative, like I'm remembering say Irtizaz kind of it moves through time within a day. It starts with the azan and then it goes on. In that sense there was a particular kind of narrative, but even in a lot of others. So I was curious as to how you were thinking about the overall narrativity or a lack of it or a deliberate lack of it or play with it when you guys were composing the whole thing, because I was very interested in the fact that it started off with a playlist but it ended up becoming compositions. So how did you manage to kind of jump from this playlist board to the compositional part of it? Yeah, Tanya.
Yeah, so basically, I was also looking at these sounds like a time diary that had common everyday sequence patterns, like for me, at least for my sounds. And And one of the thing I felt like in other audios, like by analyzing these noise behind the main audio, I could assign them a visual component. Like it also created a new surreal kind of space for me. And I was for my audios, I was trying to look at these common patterns with respect to not only how much time individual spend on certain everyday activities, but rather how those activities are sequenced throughout the day, by which we can guess what time it is. So yeah, that was the thought behind my audios.
Others, any more responses?
I think my audios were a mixture of absurd things. I mean, they were not planned or created with anything in mind, but they ended up creating sort of like that. That's what I think came through for me also when I was listening. This constant thing of being oriented and then to get disoriented from life, from everything that goes around you. So, yeah, so I think it crossed over to being absurd after a while for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, while listening to you, Niharika, I felt like the washing machine sound was kind of a motif. I mean, I read it as a motif, particularly, although it came in other sounds also. And I had this fascinating moment when there was a sound of some children playing, and then this child is kind of shouting, and then the washing machine sound comes, and I had this image of very dark image of a child inside a washing machine. But in that sense, I'm reading what you're saying in terms of a surreal image. Some kind of
Yeah,
sequentiality, you know.
yeah, I think that was the intention of juxtaposing these sounds together with the flute and then the construction and yeah.
But like last time, I think when we were talking, I think you had mentioned ki, the kind of like how do you sense through sound whether it's day or night, and like that was something I was trying to figure out while I was listening to everyone, but I'm not sure. That's what it was very difficult to imagine when these sounds are being produced, except for maybe really loud sounds. Um, and yeah, like that sense of duration also completely shifts. Like you're not able to locate a particular time in the day. Um, for most parts, especially like especially voices, like when there aren't any voices, when they are kind of surround sounds. Um, and I was wondering, like, if, like, when you were listening to each other's sounds, were you able to figure out, like, timings during the day or the night? Um, yeah, it's curious since it came up last time. Yeah, it is that.
Yeah, I think I've played like so much with the sense of this night and day that I honestly think that I've lost that division of रात की कौन सी आवाजें हैं, दिन की कौन सी आवाजें. Uh, and I think with Niharika, I did not listen too deeply because I also मैं सो गई थी बीच में उसमें. But I generally felt that कि वो you can actually like if you just play these sounds and I really think it was really difficult to figure out. Really difficult even if you listen too close. And especially if there are like pauses and silences, then it becomes really hard to figure out what this could be. I remember while I was recording these sounds, I would put I would keep the recording on, and then sometimes I would forget कि मैंने खुला रखा हुआ है, and then I think एक दो घंटे का एक ऑडियो बन गया था मेरा just अजान के बाद की silence. And I think those kind of things when I was also recording, I also figured कि if and I purposefully put these silences no sounds, because then it also um, like it allows you to speculate कि क्या हो रहा है, like ये रेडियो बंद हो गया, या ये दिन है, ये रात है, ये सुबह का वक्त है, ये कौन सा वक्त है. And I think as much as there are noises around us, there are these weird silences. Maybe it's also in our head that we keep like it's completely silent or maybe numb in our heads. कि इतने शोर में भी sometimes we just don't uh, like register that, and I don't know how that kind of barrier happens in our head.
I was also curious about. Oh yeah, sorry, Niharika, please go on.
This kind of reminds me of uh, um, a piece of writing by Firak Gorakhpuri. I think I had mentioned this long time back also in one of our classes, where when he was imprisoned, जब वो like काल कोठरी में थे basically, so there was no source of light in it. So how he would recognize if it is day or night, उस पे उन्होंने लिखा था, इक्का दुक्का सदाए जंजीर जिंदा में रात हो गई. मतलब जब उनको ये सिर्फ एक या दो जंजीरों की हिलने की आवाज आ रही थी, that's how he used to guess कि रात है, अभी सब सो रहे हैं.
There's similar anecdote by Faiz also, but it's not about the sound, it's about the light. And he has written that वो जिंदा की एक रात में, when the moonlight pierces through the window, and that's how I know कि जब वो moonlight pierce कर रही है जिंदा की खिड़की से, जिंदा being the prison, वो फिर उनकी जो shackles है उनको brighten up कर देते हैं. So that's how he knew कि this like night had come up and it was a full night. And the other time he got a like how he got a sense of time was when I think Noor Jahan was supposed to do a show, uh, and she took up his ghazal and she did a broadcast. I think Noor Jahan ही थी वो अयूब खान या जियाउल हक के टाइम पे. तो उस टाइम पे भी he has written about that time prison में, जब वो ब्रॉडकास्ट हुआ पूरे जेल में, उन्होंने वो हम देखे हैं सुना. And he also like the story is that when when he was उसके बाद उन्होंने कभी वो गजल पढ़ी नहीं पब्लिक में, because then he declared कि वो गजल अब मेरी नहीं है, वो नूर जहां की है. And all of these happened while they were in prison, and there are lots of these which was also which has also been my interest, this idea of incarceration and what happens with this experience of day and night. And that's why like उसमें वो silences और फिर वो क्या pairs करता है किस time पे. There's this very interesting book by Bobby Sands. He was an Irish Republican prisoner, and he writes about this day in his life. और उसमें भी the only time he could recognize कि वक्त spend हो रहा है is how when he realized कि like these birds are coming on the window or there is snow falling and there are guards coming out in the corridor and all of those things. So it was really fascinating to तानिया वाले वक्त में और तालिया के वक्त में और कुलसूम के वक्त में to see कि वो सेंस ऑफ नैरेटिव उसमें अगर नहीं भी हो तो वो बन रहा था, क्योंकि देयर वाज समथिंग कमिंग आफ्टर द अदर. एंड इट डिडंट फील लाइक दैट इट वाज अ कॉन्शियस एफर्ट. इट फेल्ट लाइक कि वो तो ऐसा ही होता है दिन.
I was actually curious to hear from Kulsum because she seemed to be doing something with this idea of looping that I was curious about. Things seem to be looping, but then they seem to be stopping. New things seem to be starting. There was some structure to it, but at the same time, that structure was also being played around with new sounds coming in.
Yeah, so when I'm hearing myself, so I when I was basically hearing them initially, I had not really looped any of them, but then to listen to them, because I had also recorded them in bits and portions, so when I was listening to them, so it was getting distracting for me. But then there was a sense of pattern which was creating when I was repeating those same recordings, you know. Plus, I had anyways like recorded from basically from midnight till the end of the day. So, so also that there was also a sense of time which was eventually being created. So, even the juxtapositions of one after the other, all of that was very conscious. Like before, I was also thinking of adding those two songs which I mentioned in the playlist. But then when I added those, so then it was taking a very different, I mean, that was not really getting in the flow of the entire audio. So I ended up increasing the time of the similar ones and creating a loop in them. Yeah.
So when he's writing Kulsum's audio reminded her of this video by Jim Henson. Um, it reminded me of this disintegration loops. William Basinski's.
Yeah.
Where of course the materiality really comes through, and it's been a question for me as to how does one translate it into the digital and what could happen. But with that particular album or piece of music, the idea is that he's working with these analog tapes, these old frayed analog tapes, and then playing them over and over again. And just the act of playing them over and over again, and the friction that these tapes essentially have with the rollers and the mechanism, slowly fray them more and more, and the sound changes over time until they completely get disintegrated.
Right.
So that sense of looping over and over, and each loop bringing something, or each repetition being something new, that becomes very stark.
Yeah, this particular
Yeah.
video is actually an old experimental stop motion animation, but it's a very interesting video because in the narrative, the protagonist is trying to himself escape the passage of time in a way. And the kind of sounds that Kulsum used, these very repetitive, again, everyday sort of soundscapes, it sort of took me back to this because even in this video, the scenes are like cut in a very rhythmic way and they're very fast paced, they're very quick editing, but it has this very surreal, absurdist kind of a theme. And it kind of begins with the daily habits of this person, but the daily patterns are being broken as the video kind of proceeds. So it's Kulsum's video also somehow with those daily sort of routines and soundscapes, and then cutting them and breaking them and then moving into other there was a friction is actually an interesting sort of word that I think Kaushal brought up, which I also kept getting reminded of while listening to her.
I have one last question. That I've been kind of noting down and thinking about. Generally, I was thinking that there were two categories. I was thinking in terms of in the sounds that we heard. Voices was one, and then not voices as such, or legible voices in the sense of that. And I was curious because there were certain samples that came up which were these very very legible voices that, and you ended up kind of constructing an identity around, and these voices are either taking a class or talking at a symposium or perhaps in a public situation. um, and I was curious about how you guys were thinking about these, or about using these voices in sort of your mixes, as to what kind of reading of these voices was emerging from your end when you were using them in your tracks. um, was it a reading was emerging because it was not just the voice was coming to us through this, through you guys. So in that sense, like, I'm remembering Narendran had used quite a few of these samples, especially towards the end. There was a person who was kind of narrating this incident at Jama Masjid. And I was also reminded, I'm also reminded of, I think it was in Tanya's track that you could hear another AUD professor's voice and things like that. So just a curiosity about what was the reading to be intended. Did it, after you heard it in through this medium, did it land or did it fall flat? What did you think about it?
I think when you said what about composition rather than a playlist, I think it felt very apt because it's more like a collage of, to me, what I did was like a collage of dialogues in a way. And it was much constructed, but I think listening to like the voice again, I think I felt like there is something that I cannot really control when some things are put together, and that was what happened when these two different people in two different contexts, I think, came together. And I had thought some like something like very firm, but when I heard, I think it kind of felt more like it betrayed that, and it had something else to do.
Very interesting. Yeah. Tanya, would you like to respond?
So yeah, I was not thinking of specifically the voice. I was just following the patterns that I follow during the day. So it just follows the pattern 4 बजे assignment and then मंदिर में 5 बजे आरती and then drawer में सुबह तैयार होने के लिए वो सामान ढूंढने के लिए वो anxiety हो जाती है जब नहीं मिलता है drawer में सारा सामान and then metro then lecture then चाय and then सीधे रात को मैगी. So I was following the pattern. I was not thinking of the voice or the sound or anything specifically.
Mm-hmm. Actually, what you're saying, I mean, the way you're talking about this track is essentially, I think this question of annotation came up earlier when we were listening on the chat. So, I mean, curious to hear from all of you guys in terms of how would you, because it seemed like, especially for us listening to a lot of these sounds for the first time, there were moments of recognition, there were moments of misrecognition, or perhaps not being able to discern or decipher. Not necessarily, and also like earlier, this thing was coming up about like some kind of an analytical reading of what is being heard, and that seemed to not be possible necessarily. There was a lot of an expressive reading happening, a surreal reading happening. So in that sense, what do you guys think about annotating this stuff on these tracks? And could that be an interesting possibility to think about?
Sorry, missed it a little bit. Annotating the way we do it on SoundCloud?
I mean, I don't have necessarily a form in mind. I mean, what you're saying could also be interesting. But yeah, essentially, I mean, a kind of annotation could be this kind of marking. But I mean, also thinking because there is this other channel of communication. There had to be the train sound at some point.
I think in this medium particularly, I would definitely want to annotate with voice because it's a radio and it makes sense to annotate with voice. And I did think that maybe should I do I add some voice samples to give like a context. But then I thought that maybe that's something that I can't, like 15 minutes kind of became like, okay, I don't really want to cross the like the times like too much. But I think in radio, rather than text, like what I had written, like the timestamps, I definitely want to narrate it now looking back. Or maybe but even in narration, I think there is a lot of possibility because narrator doesn't really have to give a description. Narrator can do much more than that, and that's when the possibilities open up.
I think just to add one thing to that, because I think this was something that struck me quite a bit, is what you were also saying, Kaushal, in the beginning, there was like this kind of like this forensic logic making of, oh, where is this sound from? What is its like real source? And trying to like then starting to think about like people's routines and things. But I think at some point of time, because of the impossibility of the task, you let go of it. And in that sense, there's something quite nice about not having a visual anchor, even text as a visual, even like comments, even like associations, etc. But for this kind of like meaning making or reflection to remain purely in the in an auditory realm.
True. I mean, it was producing, I mean, images that were, I mean, it's almost as if the visual will block certain images from appearing. Yeah. It is
Yeah, I think what just Radha said, we have had these conversations, right? When we talked about Rohit Vemula's text and the reading of it, and then we saw the text, like the video of it, and then those were completely two different experiences, listening experiences at least. So, and I think yesterday's your Fanon narration, uh, although it was a dense text, but I think giving no visuals makes it more interesting, because then although everybody was listening into it from their own space, we could have had all kinds of images in our heads, and we could have stayed with those images as long as we would have wanted to, and not being really in that sense structured to think a certain way about a certain thing. So I think that kind of makes it more interesting, and also radio like कि सब लोग भी सुन रहे हैं, but सब लोग अलग भी हैं, चाहे सब लोग एक साथ सुन भी रहे हो.
Yeah, definitely. No, this image of people huddled around a radio, and it seems to be playing out in many ways in this thing. That's really something like to capture and to push somewhere. It has a lot of scope in my head. Great. Yeah, sorry, please.
They sounded sort of like sound montages, like a collection of montages, and like after you look at a lot of random pictures, your head kind of mixes them up in in weird ways. So I think that's what is happening with my mind at the moment. Like I start with one sound but end with another, and बीच में पूरा खिचड़ी बना हुआ है. Yeah, and also I am also reminded of this soundtrack which became very popular sometime back. It's called Virtual Barber. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's like mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this actually what we are talking about, this very interesting thing had come up in the Fanon text actually, where he's basically talking about hysteria patients who are who he's attending to and talking to. And he's writing in the sense of that before Voice of Algeria, the nationalist radio, the revolutionary radio starts broadcasting, a lot of the hysteria patients who are kind of coming in with this anxiety and speaking in French, and the French that they speak is a kind of racist French, is a kind of really harsh French. And hysteria patients who come in after the Voice of Algeria starts becoming popular in the land, the French changes. There is still hysteria, and the hysteria is still in French, but the French suddenly becomes much more open. The speech becomes, and the words become much more amenable. So some kind of a psychic shift he's reading that happens through the use of a particular language and the colonizer's language. In the form of radio infrastructure that is kind of held on to and owned by the natives. So that psychic shift itself is very interesting to read in terms of what is going in your ear, and who are you kind of sharing that space with in the broadcast.
Yeah, like a coded sort of language, which only the listeners that are huddled in together and are kind of being able to tap into.
Actually, that reminds me. I got this sense, at least from the group that was kind of operating parallelly, that there were some inside jokes in a lot of the tracks were there. There seemed to be some hint dropping to each other happening, or maybe I'm completely wrong.
Or you're reading into it more.
Yeah, maybe I'm reading into it too much, or maybe it's the unbroadcasted or not to be broadcasted part. But
I
in any
did
case,
hear someone call Narendran towards the end. No, whose track was that? Like चाय पे चलते हैं खाना उसको भूख लग रही होगी नरेंद्रन को उसको बुला लो.
fascinating. Okay, so what I suggest now, guys, is let's stop the broadcast, and let's say our goodbyes after that, and then we can disperse. Yeah. So I guess that is the broadcast for today. I'm just going to stop it. I really don't have like a catchphrase yet. You should think of something. But yeah.
Yeah, something that rhymes with Roohafza.
Can you think of something that rhymes with
कुछ
Roohafza?
दिमाग में आए तो बताओ.
Maybe the cat furries into Ullu can be the bye-bye.
There was a punchline.
Should find it out. Maybe भूल गया. Yeah, that can be
Next
a
assignment.
next assignment. All right.
You really want a lot of assignments.
Okay, I'm going to
There
stop
was
the
this
broadcast and we're going to.
There was this one audio, one reel that kept coming up in my Instagram feed. Was this girl looking into the sky and saying that like I can't handle this as of now. So I can do a lot of handling, but not at the moment. So can you please not do this right now? And like speaking into the universe and just leaving out saying thank you, and then saying that this is manifesting. Look it up. I think that because we kept talking to each other about this कि ये क्या हो रहा है हमारे साथ, that these things of helping and feeling कि हमारे साथ बहुत अजीब चीजें हो रही है at the moment with regards to college. I think that kind of reel tapped into that energy and it kept coming up in my feed.
Okay, I'm just going to stop the broadcast first before we continue talking. Okay, I think that's that then.